And hello, everybody. You're very welcome to a new episode of Redefining CyberSecurity. I'm your host, John Martin, where I get to talk about all kinds of cool things with cool people, looking at how we can enable the business safely in security. Of course, a lot of that's driven by technology. The business adopts technology and security teams adopt technology to help shore it up. We often miss the mark on the human element. And I saw a post online, as most of my episodes are driven by inspiration by others' good work. And today's no different. Lee Vorthman is on with me. Lee, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And you did a good post on whether or not, let me pull up the right title, are traditional IT roles still relevant in today's modern security org? And it's a thought that I've had for a long time. It's been rattling around in my brain in the dust and all the other stuff up in there. But it prompted the thought, because I often looked at it purely earlier on from the cloud perspective, which you touch on in your post. But I think there's a broader view here, and we're going to get into some of that today and look at the role and the skills of the people and some of your thoughts on that, many of which I share. And I think it'd be a fun chat today. So I'm thrilled to have you on. Before we get into it, though, a few words about what you are up to, Lee.
Yeah, sure. So for those of you that don't know me, find me on LinkedIn or I have a blog that Sean is referencing. It's called 370security.com, blog.370security.com. But I've been the chief security officer for Oracle's advertising group for the past about 5 years going on now. And so, doing all the things security, and I draw a lot of inspiration for what I write about from my current role, but I obviously don't reference my current company because they'll get mad at me. And so my thoughts are my own and not my company's. But, I've been into the tech space, honestly, since like 97. We started out writing like web pages and, doing that stuff, went through the .com crash and the whole, 2 digits of 2000 versus like, is it going to cause an, existential crash with the whole 2000 thing? And, went through that and did networking and did some stuff with defense contractors after I got out of the military, and then got back into cybersecurity, and I've been doing it ever since. So it's been a whirlwind, and I hope that my experience, as diverse as it is, can act as hopefully a guiding point or a lesson for other people that want to get into the industry or at least learn from stuff. And, I'm constantly evolving as well. And that's what I try to share with my audience. So great to meet everyone, and hope to see you out there.
Yep, it's fantastic. And I encourage everybody to check out the blog. Now I have to, I don't know what the reference is. There's a 451 on the badge on this image. Does that mean anything in particular, or just happen to be a random number on the blog? There are two runners crossing the finish line.
Oh, I'm not overly happy with that image. I was trying to figure out like a metaphorical representation of like trying to represent like how someone's getting left behind, because like that's kind of what we're talking about here with the change in the roles, is that someone's going to feel left behind as you're pivoting. And the only thing I could kind of get I was using Microsoft Copilot, right? And so they're using DALL-E, and the only thing I could kind of get it close to like generating something that felt relevant was that running image. And then of course it puts in like these random numbers and text and stuff in there. I was like, well, it's good enough, so they don't mean anything. It's just trying to give you all something to anchor off of. And obviously AI still has its challenges for stuff.
Oh yeah. Cause I look at that and I think security, and I think the analyst industry, and that number references one of the
I like how deep you're going with it. That's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely a hidden message. If you crack the code, send it to me. Right?
There you go. I'll tell you what I'm thinking there. But because it's interesting, because when I was thinking about it, the analysts, God bless them. I mean, I'm not picking on them by any stretch here, but a lot of them focus on the tech as well, and how can the tech help overcome problems. And I don't know, some of them do a good job, I think, looking at operations, which definitely ties people in too. But it's really about when you're looking at Magic Quaalude quadrants, it's always about the company and their technology.
We're seeing that fundamental shift now too. I mean, if you've noticed a lot of the conversations going on, and with like, the SEC guidelines, which, is a whole nother topic, but a lot of the security roles that are out there, right, it's no longer about technology, right? It's about the business, it's about risk, it's about the softer skills, right, of that type of thing. And I think we're definitely seeing that pivot in the industry for the role. And I think it's a good one to write about, right? It's a good one to talk about because people want to get into security because it's the cool thing and you can hack stuff, right? And you can learn about all this cool technology, but it's like, that's just one component of it that you need to master. And to be a true good professional, to your point, like an analyst or whatever, there's a lot of different aspects to it. And the magic quadrants only capture a certain part of that. They're not capturing, the cost of change or the cost of people or the cost of the technology or whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was the catalyst behind this? Was there a trigger that said, I need to write this now, or has it been brewing in your mind for a while?
It's been brewing in my mind for a while. I think that, there's companies and businesses and organizations are at different periods of their journey, right? And I'm still surprised, maybe I'm not surprised, but there are still companies out there that are still in traditional data centers. That I've talked to companies that are like, we're getting out of the cloud, we're going back, we're not happy with it. And so I think that prompts kind of the discussion, right, around like, well, like, what does it look like, right? If you are in a traditional data center and then you go to like a hybrid and then you go to like a true cloud and then you go to like microservices, like, how do I need to think about that as a leader? Because like how you structure your organization, how you up level and design the skill sets and training for your people, how you think about hiring, everything kind of follows from the business strategy. And it's not something I've seen a lot of people talk about. And it's been like rattling around in my head. I'm actually going to give a talk about it at the Rocky Mountain Information Security Conference along this same topic, because I think, if you're an aspiring CISO or a security leader, like you can't just go out and be like, well, I'm just going to hire these traditional roles. I need a network security guy. It's like, well, do you? Like, what if everything's code? Like, do you? Right. And so that's kind of what prompted it to me, was just share my thoughts and experience, having done multiple cloud migrations, from data centers on-prem to the cloud. It's not something I've heard anyone like really talk about how their org structure changes and how the skill sets change and things like that. And so I figured I'd just share my thoughts, and I'm glad it resonated.
Yeah. So I think I shared many of your thoughts as you bring your tech stack over on-prem to cloud. The software basically has different configurations. The way you look at the logs is different. The way you ingest the logs, the way you respond to incidents looks different. Talk to me a bit about that chain. And we can also talk about microservices and third-party services and open source stuff. Take it as broad as you want.
Sure.
But what are some of the things that most organizations fail to recognize beyond that? We're going to move this physical thing to a virtual thing in the cloud.
Yeah. So a lot, there's a lot there. I think the first thing to recognize, right, when you're shifting from like an on-prem or data center environment to the cloud is that you're giving up control of that environment, and maybe some of the financial benefits of like being able to amortize or capitalize on resources for agility and velocity and speed. But that's a trade-off, right? And so like, great, we can get products to market faster, we can do things faster, we can do things more agilely, or however you want to describe it. But there's a trade-off there in terms of like, you don't own the network, right? So like most cloud companies, right, Amazon, Azure, Oracle, Google, right, have a shared service model where it's like if you're doing infrastructure as a service, right, they are the ones that manage the underlying infrastructure. So you don't have to worry about racking and stacking. You don't have to update, the underlying firmware of anything. A lot of times you don't have to like plug anything in, right? You're just there consuming it. So that's great, right? We can consume all the things, but that presents challenges from a security perspective, because like if you're used to like running and controlling your own network, you can do a lot of things. You can do full packet capture. You can get NetFlow. You can run your own scans and full penetration tests, and not have to worry about the consequences. But in that kind of cloud service model, there's very defined ways to do that. Like you can't just go penetration test like the entire environment without contacting them first. You have a very reduced scope. Same with like packet capture or NetFlow. You can get it, but it's definitely reduced and maybe not as useful as it would be if you had like the full access to your entire network. So I think, it's just changing the mindset a little bit of like, okay, I'm operating in this shared tenancy model. I don't have full control. How do I still maintain the security of that? And, it comes with a skill set shift as well, right? Because like, to your point, if you're going to go to virtual machines or virtual environments or being able to scale up compute, get logs, things like that, great. We can consume all those things. It costs money, right? So do you really want to store petabytes and petabytes of logs? Maybe not. Maybe you don't need it, right? And so I think the agility and getting to the cloud really, I think for companies forces them to become more optimized in terms of like their IT fundamentals. Because you're no longer like physically constrained. And so you can do a lot of different things. And then, the other issue I see with like getting to the cloud that people sometimes forget about is like, great, yeah, we can spin all these things up, but, you need to have really robust processes to a couple of things, right? First of all, before the virtual machines or your containers or whatever you're doing get kind of launched, you want to have some level of visibility and control into that, because like if you don't, everyone's doing their own thing. You have no standardized images. You're going to have a lot of vulnerabilities. We can talk about open source software and supply chain. That's a whole big issue, right? So I think my biggest recommendation to people having done multiple cloud migrations is, if you don't know what you're doing, get someone in to consult and help you understand. Because if you just, tell your company like, hey, we're going digital first, we're going to the cloud, and let everyone do whatever they want to, it's like Pandora's box, and it's really hard to like rein that in. And specifically from a security perspective, if you want to like get in front of like, the CI/CD, pipeline and put in, software security scans and make sure images are vetted and hardened before they go into production and don't have vulnerabilities, that's all process changes that is very, very difficult to kind of rein in after the fact when you've given people all of this freedom to do stuff. So I'll stop there and kind of, we can dive in wherever you want to, but there's like a ton to think about as you shift to this, different philosophy.
I think we're both filling our minds with too much stuff, but I mean, it's cool because I'm thinking a ton. I'm sure the folks listening and watching are as well. I want to go to, because you list some traditional rules here, and as you were describing some of the stuff, and I was looking at these roles, I'm thinking, okay, so to your point, somebody's racking and stacking, the hardware engineer, right, building the boxes, perhaps even. What do they do instead? If the company doesn't have a good plan, do they like try to slot themselves in? They don't want to lose their job, of course. So do they have to find a new place in the cloud environment where they become relevant, or what happens to some of these roles? You list a few of them in your post.
Yeah, I think it depends, right? I mean, so certainly that skill set is still needed. It just might not be needed within that organization, right? And so the reality is like if you're racking and stacking, or you're doing, motherboard design or something like that, that is no longer like a physical security or physical thing needed by the company. There's other companies that need that, right? You can go work for those cloud companies, but let's just say you love the company that you work for, you've been there forever. I think the honest answer is it's a skill set change, right? And we've had some conversations, with our team members where it's like, hey, we're going to this thing. We don't need this skill set. Like we're giving you enough time to learn the new skill set and kind of retrain yourself. But if you don't want to do that, let's have a conversation and we can help you find a place to land somewhere else. So I think it's honestly, I kind of put it back on the individual. It's like, is this place somewhere that you want to stay and you're open to learning like something new, which might require coding. It might require an entirely new skill set or a fork in your career. Or do you really, really love what you do? And if you love racking and stacking, and you love these traditional roles, like there's someone out there that needs that, just not us, right? And I think that's the pivotal conversation you have to have as a leader to kind of transform your business. Is like, you're going to have to, this is always a challenge, right? You're going to have to keep the business going with what you're doing while slowly like churning over, right, the skills and resources and people that you have to be able to do the new thing, but not so catastrophically that like, you leave the old thing behind and it's falling over and you haven't gotten to the new thing yet, right? So I think it's a delicate balance act. And I usually, at least for me, have a conversation with the team or the individuals and say, hey, look, this is where we're going. This is enough time for you to get there. These are the things I recommend you do. If you don't want to be on this journey, let us know and we'll help you find a place to land.
Can you describe kind of the process of the initial move? And what I'm trying to figure out is, do organizations I know there's different levels of shifting, right? Like moving stuff over, do you refactor, do you all these different things? What's your sense? Do folks, organizations, I should say, they basically kind of lift and shift, or do you see many refactoring applications? Do you see a big move all the way to containers, so they're not dependent on specific underlying platforms?
I think it depends on your org. What I would say is more typical is what happens is like they lift and shift, right? So like they have a core data set that's their intellectual property. It's easier to stand up the compute and the networking stuff. So you kind of get that fence, that area carved out, and then you move your data over, right? And so you really just kind of duplicate what's in the data center in the cloud environment. And that's a learning thing. And then usually what happens is someone gets the bill and they're like, why the heck is this more expensive than us running on-prem? And they're like, oh, because that's not how you do it in the cloud. Like there's, you need to optimize. And so then to your point, then they go down and they refactor their applications. They are really tight about how they, ingest and egress data, because that's one of the primary costs of the cloud is how you get data in and out of there. And so they optimize, right? And then once they optimize, they're like, oh, it'd be really nice if we didn't have to build a gold image for this OS every time we want to do something. Or let's go to virtual machines. And then they get the virtual machines. They're like, man, this is like a pain to manage. And we noticed that we provisioned this, 10,000 core system, but we're only using 1,000 cores. That's not great. We're paying more money for something than, that we don't need. Then they go to containers, right? That's this is the progression. They go to containers because they've already virtualized. So their apps have already kind of gotten to that. So then they go to containers, much more efficient use of their compute and their resources stack. And so I generally, what I see is an evolution as the company matures and gets more comfortable around this cloud digital environment. They kind of naturally start figuring out how to do cost control, how to do optimization, how to use their resources, how to get to the next step and be more agile, how to improve their CI/CD pipeline, et cetera, et cetera. So I haven't seen a company that's just magically gone from the data center to Kubernetes and containers. If you have, congratulations. I think that you've leapfrogged to a lot of the evolutionary step of going to the cloud. But I wouldn't be surprised if someone has. If you're a very, very mature data center, it's not. It's definitely possible for you to do that, but it's not typical, I would say.
Yeah. And even less typical, I would think, is organizations that maybe rethink their business processes and the apps that they're using and the workflows that enable them. And I don't know, redo all that stuff as well at the same time. Probably not.
Probably not. I mean, one advantage, right, of moving to the cloud is that, there's typically what are called availability zones or different regions, right? And so, you can kind of stage your stuff similar to a data center, right? You can stage your stuff closer to where your customer base is and things like that. But a lot of people, or at least I've seen a lot of companies that rely on the inherent disaster recovery nature of the cloud, right? The fact that it is distributed, they're like, that's good enough, right? But to your point, that's not necessarily sufficient, right, for your application. And the advantage of being in the cloud is that you do have that distributed environment, but you have to do a little bit of planning to make sure that your app is going to function, right? Because as we've seen, if the eastern region, right, of a cloud provider goes down, Netflix goes down, right, and then everyone's unhappy. So this is why the whole site reliability engineering type of field has come out, right? Because it's okay, great, we need to figure out how we can, have certain services disappear, but still keep our customers, operating, and maybe we cache stuff, or maybe we have a complete failover, or maybe we do something different, right, to make sure that our business is functioning. But to your point, it's a mindset, I think, that you need to think about how you're going to design your applications to be able to run in this more agile environment that comes with these advantages of being able to fail over or provide customers with faster access or lower latency or, better reliability or, et cetera, right?
So when you mention SRE, site reliability engineering, my mind immediately goes to next level, perhaps, of platform engineering, where I don't know. I think there's a tremendous overlap between the two.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this? And we're probably kind of steering, as most people do, back to the tech.
Right.
But bringing it back to the roles and the skills, is there a value for some of the existing roles to apply themselves in the SRE and the platform engineering type of environment, perhaps, if organizations can embrace those things properly, to provide value where they're not needed in other areas now?
I definitely think so, right? And the point of my blog post was that, like, even though you might not need a dedicated person to do that role, you still need the skill sets. And so, like, with site reliability engineering, right, with your SREs, you need someone that understands the fundamental architectures of how the platform or the underlying infrastructure works, so that they can design your application or your business or your site to be able to have that reliability that you want. And so, they need to understand networking. They need to understand load balancers. They need to understand DNS. They need to understand authentication, right? They need to understand all these things that are core technology skill sets that typically, if you ran your own data center, probably would be done by a dedicated function or team. But now is a skill set, that's a more breadth skill set of these, specialized roles you're seeing kind of come up as part of going to the cloud. So yeah, I definitely think that the roles are still needed. If we can go off on a little tangent, I wrote kind of a follow-up on this one, which is I wrote an article about, like, why isn't auto patching a thing? And I'll tie this back to, like, the SRE stuff, because, like, it should be, right? We should be able to just go and, like, say, don't call me, right? Just apply the patches, reboot the server, do all of your QA and, quality assurance, and quality control testing, and, all of that stuff that you want to do as part of your dev and test and staging. That should all be automatic. Well, why isn't it automatic? We're still dealing with vulnerabilities. We're still dealing with applications that have bugs and things like that. We're still dealing with applications that aren't up to the latest version, on and on and on, right? It's because, coming back to, SRE, like, the core functions of how to design your application or your business to be reliable, which, by the way, is not just a business thing, right? It's like, yes, you want to get money. You want to make sure you're still up and doing the things you want to do, but it's also a finance thing, right? It's also a security thing. It's also a sales thing. And so, like, being able to think about this from a business standpoint and take the advantages of the cloud, right? And then design your business function to be able to operate, like Netflix is famous for doing this, right? They had the chaos monkey that would go through and just tear stuff down. And then if it degraded too much, they would, okay, good, we've broken it, we'll bring it back up. But they were testing stuff for that reason. I think that level of maturity is where critical businesses or businesses that are really serious about it need to get to, which will have knock-on effects to security and sales and operations and customer experience and all that type of stuff. But a lot of people don't think about that. They still come back to and say, we're in the cloud. It's great. If, it never goes down. And it's like, good luck with that, So I do think, tying back to, the skill sets, right? If you have people that have this skill set and can come in and help you on your journey getting to the cloud, and can help you do this stuff to up level and optimize and make sure that your business is going to run, even if an availability zone goes down, or you have a denial of service in one region, or whatever it's going to be. That's a core skill set that's drawing on those traditional skills that are then, amalgamated and slammed into this, these new skills, whether they're site reliability engineering or some other type of role that, has been smashed in with these different skill sets.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm just wondering, because people who listen to the show probably heard me say this before, but I feel that organizations spend a lot on transforming something of some part of the business, right? And a big part of that is investing in the cloud, and maybe then enhancing their applications and improving the workflows and really crunching the numbers to get the most out of marketing operations, right? So there's a lot of investment to transform things, to cut costs and increase revenue. And I feel security gets left out. It's the I don't want to redheaded stepchild. I don't know if that's
how much time do we have. I think you're right.
It's the perfect time to do that stuff. I know it. To your point earlier, it's very tactical. We just want to shift, and then we'll go from there. But to me, this is a great place to look at what's our risk exposure, what's our real objective with the business, and how do we achieve that most effectively in the safest way possible without killing our security and surrounding IT organization. So I don't know, any thoughts on that?
I think you're spot on, right? I think, security tends to be an afterthought, or, if it is thought of, it's viewed as an impediment, right? It's like, oh, well, we'll worry about that afterwards because they're just going to slow us down. Like we got to get to the cloud, as quickly as possible, right? But, to your point, you're missing an opportunity. And, I don't know, we can get technical a little bit, but like in my undergrad, right, I was a systems and industrial engineering. And one of the classes we took was like on requirements analysis. And there's like a famous graph which is like, basically like there's a line, is like an exponential like line going up, like an S curve going up from the bottom left up to the top right. And the S curve is showing the cost of change the longer you wait, like on the X axis. The longer the time goes on, the Y axis is the cost, right? And so like to your point, if you wait to do security, like after you've gotten to the cloud and you're many months down the road and you're like, oh wait, we forgot about this, we should do it. You're gonna spend a lot more money up on that curve than you would have if you had just built it in from the front. And I think it's honestly a travesty of our profession in that we're an afterthought and, we're viewed as like, this insurance policy or this impediment, when the reality is if we're included at the front, help design these things properly, really what we're talking about is we come back to the SRE conversation. These are fundamentals, right, of IT operations, of business operations that should be in place anyway to make your business function, but they help security in terms of what we want to do. Asset inventory, great example. Is that a security issue? No, right? But we need it in order to be successful, but so does finance, right? So does your operations team. So does like your development team, right? So like, I think that what I would like to see, or my ideal, my if I can plead to the industry and if I can help in any way, is like if you're going on this journey, right, get involved early and really, help to convince the business that you're there to add value and not be an impediment. Because I think if you can get these fundamentals right as you're migrating, instead of doing it after the fact, you'll be in a much, much better place than trying to, rein in Pandora's box after the fact.
Yeah. So let's as we start to come to the close here, I'm sure I have a gazillion more questions, but anyway, let's bring it back to the roles and the skills, and maybe latch on to this point that we were just talking about. As people want to enter this field of cybersecurity, coming out of university, coming out of trade, coming out of Hack the Box or Try Hackney or whatever path that they take, and others in IT or in business that have a desire to enter this field. What would you suggest? And maybe that's two different groups, but what would you suggest they focus on to really make a difference? So clearly they're going to focus on things that get them hired.
Yeah.
But I think this next generation that enter, be it new folks or adjacent folks that have been in the workforce for a while, I think there's an opportunity for them to help redefine cybersecurity and bring in some new insights that isn't just about we've always been the afterthought. Let's continue to be the afterthought, and we'll just continue to go as we go. So what do you think?
Yeah, a little bit of a history lesson. I'll start with that. Is that if you think about how security functions got started, right? We were a function of IT or an offshoot of IT, and most security professionals that I've talked to that are have kind of the same tenure that I have, they were sysadmins, right? They were help desk people. They were network engineers. They were, Linux admin, people, right? And so they kind of took all of these different skill sets And then eventually they landed in security. And then, that kind of career progression got started. So I think my biggest advice for anyone that wants to get started in the industry is recognizing that there's a lot in this field to understand, and you don't have to understand it all at once. I'm not recommending you go out and just like deep dive on how the internet works, but I think, the nice thing about our profession is that there's a lot of different specializations, right? You can go into compliance, you can go into privacy, you can go into data, you can go to identity, you can go to, technical and offensive stuff, and, choose your poison where you want to be. But my biggest advice is that to be as effective as you can be, like never stop learning. And like, if you're a penetration tester and you don't understand how the packets are flowing from your Nmap tool over to the end system, like figure that out, right? Because understanding the iOS model is going to be effective for making you a better, person and a better asset, down the road. And it's going to make you better at your job. And if we come back to like the cloud model, right? As the business shifts, right? So if you were, really comfortable in the data center model and you went to the cloud, or you're really comfortable in the cloud and you don't understand Docker and Kubernetes and microservices, the more you understand about the underlying technology and business processes and regulations, or whatever your specific specialty is, I think the more job security and flexibility you'll have as the business pivots to get there, because you'll be able to be like, oh yeah, I understand that. There's nothing different here. Or we need to worry about this thing. This is a risk that we haven't considered, whatever it's going to be. So my biggest advice is like, if you're coming out of school or your boot camp or whatever you're coming out of, great, do that thing, land your job. Once you land your job, be a sponge, soak it all up. I'm a huge proponent of like, okay, just because you're in GRC, or just because you're in security engineering, or just because you're in incident response, like go sit with another team for, one day a week and learn what they do, and see from their lens and their shoes, and get that cross training. And, the last thing I'll say on this topic is like, I think regardless of where you sit, whether you're in GRC or privacy or engineering or technical or non-technical or leadership, I think, the reality is, having an understanding of coding and scripting is kind of a must at this point in terms of like being effective at your job. And I don't mean that like you're writing some, the next version of, the sim, but like if you're in GRC, right, and you need to pull a data set and help with an audit, you might want to, write some code to be able to help you do that more easily, as opposed to just, trying to do it in Excel spreadsheets, right? So I think there's a lot of advantage to that. And so that's what I'm seeing the trend, especially as you go more into microservices and things get compressed up the stack. It's all becoming code, and to be more effective at your job, understanding that will really, really help you. So that's my kind of summary of that.
I love it. And I'm going to make you do it again. But this time from the security leadership and executive leadership perspective, because I think we need to change the way we hire folks as well. Some of the backgrounds they have. To your point, I think coding is necessary, but also business logic is necessary. Workflows and understanding use cases and stories and the experience that users have, be it internal employees, be it partners, supporting the supply chain that helps you deliver your services, be it the customers that interact with you and your services. So what do you tell them in terms of how to, I don't want to say if confidently is the right word, but be comfortable, I guess, in changing and opening up how they find new talent as they bring new folks in?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here, right? Which is, let's just talk about the kind of security leadership side, which is the trend that we're seeing, at least that I'm seeing with security leadership, is that, historically the CISO position or any of the kind of leadership positions in security have been viewed as very technical or like compliance roles. And okay, like we can, just kind of simplify it, but I don't think that is anywhere near accurate, nor is that where the industry is going from a regulatory standpoint or from a business standpoint. And I think, if anyone aspires to be in a leadership role, regardless of what your specialization is, or if you want to be a CISO, you have to understand the business fundamentals. And I liken this back to, the military, which is, if anyone was a Marine or understands the Marines, they have this saying of every Marine is a rifleman. In the Navy, right, where I was at, everyone gets kind of like their surface warfare pin or some sort of designator. Really, all that is that you spent time to understand the rest of the business or the unit to be more effective as, a sailor or a soldier or a Marine, right? So similarly with leadership, I think that that's really critically important. How does HR work? How does finance work? How do all these things work? And if you don't have that, I just don't think you're going to be successful going forward. So to come back to your original question is what do we need to look for? So what I look for now in the roles that I look for is I try to keep the role, the job description, very, very open, right? So I'm not asking for degrees necessarily, because I don't think that necessarily represents, the skill set of someone. I'd rather hire for aptitude and attitude than hire for technical skill set. But we try to, at least I try to flavor my job descriptions to have here's what you will be doing. Here's what we expect you to do, and not a laundry list of every technical certification and every protocol and everything like that. The challenge is I'm finding, right, is that if you want someone that's a DevSecOps engineer, or you want someone that understands Kubernetes and Docker and microservices, if you want an application security engineer or a really good, offensive, security or threat hunter or penetration tester, those skills are in exceptionally high demand, right? And so you have to kind of craft your resume or your job description in a way that is going to get people to come and join you and be descriptive. And you got to be willing to move very, very quickly on it. So,
yeah, fantastically. Boy, I feel we could keep going for hours on this.
Yeah, well, let's do another one if you want. We can break it up, a multi-part series.
I think we should. I think we should maybe dive into some of the different roles.
That'd be great.
Well. Yeah, well, let's do this. I'm going to encourage everybody. You said you have a follow-up to this, so please share that link with me as well. I'll include both of those in the show notes.
Sure.
And folks should check out the blog that Lee puts together. And you're very welcome back anytime, of course. This is an area that I love to talk about, anything around platform and engineering and security operations, and all back to the business is fun stuff for me.
Definitely.
Any final thoughts before we wrap?
Just for the audience, keep learning and keep doing what you're doing, keep fighting the good fight. And, I think I'm really pleased with where the industry is going. And I think we have a great community, and, continue to be a part of it and continue to participate. And thanks for listening.
Yeah. And thanks for giving back to the community through your post and joining me here on this. Thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Redefining Cybersecurity. I think we did a bit of that today, and very grateful for Lee helping me do that. Appreciate you all listening. Please do share, subscribe, and all the other fun stuff. If you have something to say, think something differently about what we talked about today, please do comment. And Lee, I'm going to close with a congratulations. And it's for something we didn't talk about, and I'm going to leave it at that. And if somebody can guess, I'll give them a high five when I see them. What it was that we didn't talk about that I think everywhere else does has talked about on every other episode. So anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks, Lee.
See ya. All right. Bye-bye.